Welcome back to Believers IAS Academy, and in this today's playlist of discussing the very high yield topics for the Prelims 2025 as a part of our playlist, the Prelims Simplified, we are bringing to you the polity number 5, the lecture 5 on the topic Union and its territories. Before we start, mind you, this is not a proper lecture of the entire chapter, but rather this is an exercise called recalling, active recalling, which helps students to recall all the information that they have studied, which primarily matters a lot on the day of the examination, most specifically the prelims. So here from the chapter Union and its territory, directly from Lakshmikant, we have summarized the entire chapter into 10 must know questions, which pretty much subsumes the entire chapter, vice versa. So in this video we will be discussing about all of these 10 questions, and that's all for this particular video. So let's begin. So I hope you know the drill by now, that what we do is we first read out the question, give some time so that the students can actively participate and try to recall the answer, because if they really can recall the information for all the questions or the answers for all the questions, it pretty much means that they are going to do really good even on the day of the prelims as well, right? So let's begin. Now, question number 1: why is India described as Union of States despite having a federal constitution, right? Next, which is a wider expression, territory of India or Union of India? Third question: what is the basic difference between Article 2 and Article 3 of the Indian Constitution? Question number 4: whose approval is required for a bill altering state boundaries or area? Question number 5: are laws creating new states or altering existing states called or considered as an amendment to the Constitution under Article 368? Now, next question: how can Indian territory be ceded to a foreign country? Question number 7: what were Part A, B, C and D states? And question number 8: why was the Linguistic Provinces Commission appointed and what were its recommendations? Question number 9: why was the Fazl Ali Commission constituted and what was its outcome? And last question: how did the political map of India change after 1956? So I hope you might have understood that all of these 10 questions are pretty much directly subsuming the entire chapter. So now, without any further delay, let's directly start the explanation and we will wind it up soon. So question number 1: why is India considered a Union of States despite having a federal constitution? Because India is described as Union of States. Article 1, right? Article 1 of the Indian Constitution says India can also be called as Bharat, is a union of states, to emphasize the indestructibility of the nature of the states, right? Indestructibility of the union, as opposed to the federation that we see in US, because in US the federation was an agreement between various states that they will come together, form an amalgamation and then create a federation, right? So hence, right, the federation is not the result of an agreement among states, correct? But on the other hand, in India it's not like that, right? So states have no right to secede. It is not an agreement, right? We have indestructible state, right? So states per se do not have the right to secede in India. Hence, India is a federal country in structure but unitary in spirit. So for the prelims, this is very important. Indestructible union of destructible states means the states within the country, within the territory, can be altered, changed, modified and all of that, right? But the union consisting of the entire state, all the states of India, cannot be destructible, cannot be fractured, right? So I hope the first question is clear. Second question: which is a wider expression, territory of India or Union of India? Very simple question. In fact, the answer is the territory of India is wider, because it includes states, union territories and also those territories which may be acquired in the future as well. However, the Union of India only is referred to the states alone, right? Third question: what is the basic difference between Article 2 and Article 3? Very important, very important articles. Right from the very first few articles, if you're asking which are the important articles, except Article 1, the very next important articles are 2, 3 and 4. So now, why are these important? We will try and understand in terms of the difference, because these are laws under these articles considered another follow-up question is that are laws under these articles considered constitutional amendments? Means any law that has been created under these articles, Article 2 and Article 3, is it considered an amendment to the Constitution? Is it considered a Constitutional Amendment Act under 368? Is also the follow-up question. We'll see what. Anyway, Article 2 and 3, what is it? Article 2 simply means that it is that article which talks about the admission or establishment of new states, rather the interchanging or alteration of the present states. But on the other hand, Article 3 talks about the formation, alteration and reorganization of the existing states. So here we're not talking about the admission or establishment of any new territory or any new states, but we are talking about the formation, alteration and reorganization of the existing states for that matter, right? For example, you have your you have Telangana, which was separated from Andhra Pradesh, right? So that is one of the very recent example. And as a part of Article 2, it is the admission or establishment of new states. The very recent example is 1975, when Sikkim was included within the Union of the India, right? So these are the two important examples with which you can remember. And for the follow-up question, are any laws under Article 2 and 3 considered as the Constitutional Amendment Act under 368? The answer is no. It is not considered as a constitutional amendment under 368, but rather they are just a simple law, pretty much like any other ordinary law which has been passed by simple majority, right? So most of the questions here, especially beginners, they tend to make it wrong because they think it's about altering the state, it's about adding new state to the the number of states that is already present in India. So it might be a very rigorous process. So obviously special majority is required. No, you have to cut down your overthinking, and you have to cut down on becoming too over smart. Just stick to the concepts and read with clarity, right? So it is just simple majority that is required. Fourth question, whose approval is required for a bill altering the state boundaries or area? So now once again we're talking about Article 3. In Article 2 we spoke about the inclusion or the formation of any new states, but Article 3 talks about the alteration or formation or even reorganization, even changing the name of a particularly present state which is already there in India. So now whose approval is required? And now another follow-up question, it says, is state consent mandatory, right? The answer is yes, the state consent is required, but it is not mandatory for that matter. We will see what it is. However, the president must refer the bill, right? Prior recommendation must be from the president, and this has to be referred to the state legislature, and state legislative's views, however, is not binding. Means state legislature, it has to be given to the state legislature. And let's say even if state legislature says no, or whatever changes that it wants, it is not necessary that the parliament has to follow it, right? So the state legislature's views are not binding, and however the consent of the state is also not required, right? So it is pretty much like for naam ka vasta, it goes to the state legislature. And also another important thing to keep in mind under Article 3 that I can think of is this is with respect to state alteration of state boundaries, changing the state names, which has to be priorly recommended by the president, and it should go to the state legislature, and then the recommendation, the views of the state legislature must be should be taken, but it is not binding in all of that. But however, for the creation of a new union territory, to keep in mind, creation of new union territory, this does not fall under Article 2, but rather it is part of Article 3, and most importantly here, the recommendation is not required. The recommendation of that UT or a part of that territory which is part of any state, the recommendation is absolutely not required, which is very important. You have to keep in mind, right? Moving to the next question, are laws creating new states or altering existing states amendments under the Article 368, right? The answer is no. In fact, this is what Article 4 says, that any changes that has been made under Article 2 and Article 3 is not considered as an amendment to the Constitution, which is your Article 4, and these laws require only simple majority in Parliament, right? So this is one of the simple thing, because Now, another question obviously rises. So, does that mean that Parliament can, secede a particular territory of Indian territory to any foreign country? Well, that is the next question. Yeah, how can Indian territory be ceded to a foreign territory, and how are boundary disputes settled? Well, the cession of territory means the cutting down, or let's say separation of a territory, requires constitutional amendment under Article 368. Right? It requires a proper amendment under Article 368, right, and the special majority for that matter. And also, in fact, this pretty much does not mean the same as what happens in Article 2 and Article 3. Although in Article 2 and Article 3 we are talking about states, Article 2 talks about formation of new states or adding new states to the Indian. Article 3 talks about the reorganization, changing names and everything. So these are not considered a constitutional amendment act, because I hope you understood, right? Because here we are not trying to secede any particular territory out of the country, right? And on the other hand, if a territory has to be seceded out of the Indian Union, then a constitutional amendment act under Article 368 is very important. However, certain boundary disputes are settled through treaties or agreements, right, and followed by constitutional amendment if and when required. Well, the famous case with respect to this is your Berubari Union case 1960. Next question, what were the part A, B, C and D states? Which territories constituted part D states? So this is very important, you have to keep in mind. Could be a match the following question. So part A had former British provinces, part B had former princely states, part C had chief commissioners provinces, and part D had Andaman Nicobar Islands only. So this is very important, part D, because it's very likely that the question can come from here, and yeah, you can expect one from that definitely. Now question number 8, why was the Linguistic Provinces Commission appointed, and were its recommendations, what were its recommendations? So it was in the year 1948 that a linguistic commission, a commission was set up, the SK commission, and this recommended against the linguistic reorganization. Means it rather fixed or let's say it rather focused on the convenience of the governance, the administrative convenience, right? So SK commission said that reorganization of states as to how the land boundary of India, how the states should be redrawn, should be mostly determined by the convenience of the administration than based on the linguistic basis. So this is what was told by SK. So basically it completely rejected the idea of separation of states or reorganization of states based on linguistic characteristics. However, later it created a lot of resentment, and Congress had to create another committee, the JVP committee, which is the famous committee which had Jawaharlal Nehru, it had Vallabhbhai Patel, and it had Pattabi Sitaramayya, who supported the postponement. However, even there also they did not speak about any creation of the states based on the linguistic lines. However, after this, approximately I think October 1956, or let's say October 1955 and later, after the death of Mr. Potti Sri Ramulu, and the creation of Andhra Pradesh, a lot of other states also started demanding for the linguistic basis on which the states should be divided. They also started. So that's when, because of this pressure, another commission was formed, which is called as the Fazl Ali Commission. So the next question, why was the Fazl Ali Commission constituted, and what was its outcome? So 1953, it was constituted to reorganize the states, and who were the members? Fazl Ali, who was the chairman, PM Panikar, and then HN Kunjru. So these names are also important to just keep in mind. It is very important. And then next is recommended reorganization primarily on linguistic basis. So it is not the SK commission, it is not the JVP committee, but rather it is the Fazl Ali Commission. Well, in the Lakshmikant, if you can see, there is a huge page, like probably 4, 5, 6 pages of the entire history of all these commissions. In fact, only these things are important, and this is more than sufficient, right? Next, this led to the States Reorganization Act of 1976, along with the amendment of or the passage of the 7th Constitutional Amendment Act as well, which is very important. Next question: how did the political map of India change after 1956? So on November 1st, 1956, the India had 14 states and 6 union territories. The first state which were created after 1956 was Maharashtra in the year 1960. These timelines are very important. Keep in mind or even by heart. And the 16th, 17th, 18th states, in the chronological order is Manipur, Tripura, and your Meghalaya, which is MTM. And then the Northeastern Areas Reorganization Act was passed in 1971. It created Meghalaya, Manipur, and Tripura as well, right? However, Sikkim became the last state in 1975 via the 36th Constitutional Amendment Act to be added, right? We already discussed about Sikkim. So this was under Article 2. Right. So anyway, that's all for this particular video. I hope you would have gotten a clear idea about this particular chapter. So for more such playlists, do follow the Believers IAS YouTube channel. We'll come back with another video. Until then, signing off. This is Madan Gopal. Have a beautiful day.